Hello everybody and welcome to Calls. This is the 2022 Waste Management Phoenix Open Data Dive Show. Lot to get into, and including some corrections from last night, so don't want to ramble through too much of an intro here. All statistics are provided by FantasyNational.com. Amazing resource, well worth the investment. Makes me pretend that I'm pretty good at what I do, and it's going to make you a much better gambler and much smarter DFS player. Can't recommend it enough. I say it every episode. Go check them out. The links to my social media are in the description, where I post my betting cards and any interesting research that I find leading into the tournament, throughout the tournament, and so on, as well as an email to reach out to me if you want to be a part of bonus content. That is also in the description. This includes bonus videos, my tournament fact sheet that I send out to my subscribers, saying, my favorite bets and DFS plays and whatnot. So make sure you reach out to that email if you want to be a part of that content. And then lastly, chat is open. I've made some alterations to it that I hadn't made since I started the channel, so hopefully chat will be a little bit better, decreasing the time in between messages. So I made a little adjustment there, but chat's open, it's live. Please join in the interaction. I want to hear any wagers that you're thinking about, any statistics or metrics that you think play here or maybe don't play here that I think do, as well as any early leans for DFS, although DFS is mainly Wednesday nights, so I don't do a lot of the price stuff. But if we want to check on some specific players, by all means, we'll do that as well. So jump in chat. With the intro out of the way, let's dig into the data for the 2022 Waste Management Phoenix Open. And we transition over here, as we always do. If I can get my mouse to work, there it is. With the updated tournament fact sheet. Let me get sorted here, my drinks together, that way I don't have another show like a week and a half ago. Not a lot has changed here. Still a par 71 setup. I believe it was listed as the same yardage as last night. I know the stimp is still the same number at 12, so very fast. Not quite lightning, but fast Bermuda greens is what we're on here. Average green size, I don't believe that changed at all. I know it's right around 7,000 square feet. 6 holes with water in play, 3 water hazards. The same type of Bermuda grass, overseeded with all that nonsense that I really do need to get an agronomist on here to explain all that kind of stuff. So again, this is basically the same exact information from last night, from last year's tournament fact sheet. So not a lot to cover or rehash. Again, a Tom Weiskopf design, large greens, fast Bermuda, not long, not short, so no metrics to deal with there. Let me make sure chat is up, and we are going to move. Normally, we would rehash some Fantasy National stuff, but what I need to do is change to Microsoft Excel and re-explain. Hey, Darnell, how's it going, man? Glad you could join. I need to essentially redo the last part of last night's show in the initial research. By the way, Darnell, let me know how chat is. I changed some settings that hopefully will allow users or participants to send messages more quickly, and I'll see them quicker. Let me know how that goes, because I hadn't changed chat settings since I started the channel. So I figured, or I kind of looked into it and I was like, oh, need to change that. So anyway, so I'm going to redo a lot of the ending of last night, where I was trying to show you or show the rankings for particular guys based on metrics, at least on a high level, that we thought might play here. And if you'll remember, I was the moron that did not sort using the players, the events. So I was just sorting the actual numbers, and it wasn't bringing the people with it, and it caused everything to fuck up because I fucked up. So let's redo this, and I'll try to do it fairly quickly because we still got a lot of great info to get into for tonight. But I know we looked at 2 or 3 things last night. So first off, I remember that we looked at strokes gain approach, and anyone who has followed me for any length of time knows that I just prefer iron players, these strokes gain approach players, because that, to me, that is the best statistic that performs, week over week, year over year. It's indicative of long-term success. So of the players that have played this tournament, your top strokes gain approach players, and again, remember what you're looking at here on Excel is performance just at TPC Scottsdale for the Waste Management Phoenix Open. So keep that in mind. This isn't taking last week into consideration or anything like that. This is purely at TPC Scottsdale. Your top 10 strokes gain approach players at this event in the past: Hideki, Brandon Grace, Matthew Neesmith, and again, we mentioned last night to take that with a little bit of grain of salt. He's only played it once. He did play, finish 7th, so it was a good tournament. But don't overreact to just one tournament. It is very small sample size. It could have been a good week, so on and so forth. But he is 3rd. 4th would be Nate Lashley. 5th, Justin Thomas. The rest of the top 10 is Jordan Spieth, Alex Noren, Max Homa, Webb Simpson, your winner in 2020, and Gary Woodland, your winner in 2018. So of these guys, probably not a lot of surprise here. Hideki has never won this event, but being a premier player in the world, a good ball striker, it's no surprise to see him up here high on the approach leaderboard. He's just leading it. Brandon Grace has played this event only twice, but has quite a bit of success with an average finish of 6th. Lashley, the same, average finish of 10th. Then you've got your premier players: Justin Thomas, Jordan Spieth, Webb, Gary Woodland. You got Ricky Fowler, who won this tournament, I believe, in 2019. Is lurking outside the top 10 there as well. So there's your top strokes gain approach players. We also looked at putting, and I know this was really messed up because it showed that Finau and Matsuyama, all these others, were positive in putting, and that's generally just not the case. It's just not the case. So your top 10 strokes gain putters at this event in the past 5 years: Brendan Todd, that should be no surprise. He's generically a very good putter. JT Poston, Nick Watney, Daniel Berger is 4th. Generally not the greatest of putters, but he has performed well at this tournament on the greens. He just hasn't done well in other areas. 4th, Daniel Berger's 4th, and Matthew Neesmith is 5th. So you can see how he got his 7th place finish. He was very prolific with the irons, like he normally is, but he had a very good week on the greens as well, which he normally does not. So those are your top 5: Todd, Poston, Watney, Berger, Neesmith. To round out the top 10, 6 through 10 here: Ricky Fowler, again. A lot of this probably in his heyday, but he still played this event well in the past. Louis is 7th, Kuchar 8th, Sam Burns is 9th, and Xander Schauffele is 10th. Xander's had a lot of success here at this tournament without winning. Sam Burns is kind of interesting. He is only 1 for 3 in making the cut, but has hit his irons fairly well, and he's putt extremely well. The around the green is really bad, and the off the tee is really bad, which you wouldn't think from Sam Burns, but for whatever reason at this tournament, he has not driven the ball well. So there is a look at 2 of the 4 metrics that I remember going into. Another one that I remember was bogeys avoided. I believe it was either birdies or bogeys. I'm gonna do bogeys because I can't quite remember. And if it was birdies, we'll get into it later in the show. But your top 10 bogey avoiders at this tournament in the past 5 years. You've got Watney, Louis Oosthuizen, Justin Thomas, Nate Lashley, and Kevin Kisner now. So you're seeing a lot of the same names kind of pop up in different ways. Watney now on putting and bogey avoidance. JT with the irons and bogey avoidance. Nate Lashley has been there twice. Xander Schauffele is sixth in bogey avoidance. Neesmith seventh, Hideki eighth, Hudson Swafford ninth, and John Rahm is 10th in bogey avoidance here. So again, a lot of the same style names. This is the first time we've talked about Hudson Swafford. He has not played this event well, only 1 for 3, but he is avoiding his bogeys well at this tournament. He's just not getting his birdies. Let's see, who else here? Brendan Todd was number 1 in putting. Pretty good at avoiding bogeys in his one trip here. Of course, you've got the premier players, John Rahm, Hideki, Xander, JT. So a lot of these same names are popping once more. And then finally, I know for a fact we looked at strokes gained par 5 as it was seemingly the most important metric here at TPC Scottsdale, and I know you all can kind of see that in the middle of the screen, but I'll bring it over here to the beginning for you. So the top performers on the par 5s historically here at TPC Scottsdale. Matthew Neesmith, so again you can see how great of a tournament it was for him. He was probably one of the tops that year in approach. He had a good putting week. The par 5s he tore up, which you have to do here at TPC Scottsdale. So the one tournament that Matthew Neesmith played here was really good. I'm not discounting it or discrediting it. I just don't take it as much into a fact as, say, a Xander who's played here 4 times, a Hideki who's played here 4 times, even Chesson Hadley 3. So, but to get to finish out this kind of rehash from last night, your top 10 strokes gained par 5 players: Neesmith, Brooks Koepka, your defending champion; Corey Connors, Scotty Scheffler, Carlos Ortiz are your top 5. Brandon Grace, Xander, Chesson Hadley, Louis Oosthuizen, and Hideki round out the top 10. So I wanted to make sure I led off the show with that tonight, having gone back, having to edit the video from last night and realizing just how catastrophically I failed last night in trying to sort all of this for you all. So I'm going to reset this back to lowest finish. So you can see, for example, Brandon Grace has the best average finish of 6th in 2 appearances, Neesmith 7. Because we'll come back to this tonight, but I definitely wanted to start this show fixing the errors that I had made last night. So give me one moment as we switch back to Fantasy Nationals or the web page view. There we go, and we now will try to rehash quickly some of the metrics we looked at in Fantasy National. The first thing we always do is look at putting. Now that we know and looked back at the types of greens that it is, the general speed that they are, so we know from last night, and I do have the historic conditions in the breakdown if we need to, but just remember last night we saw that the green speeds are always fast. These are always Bermuda greens. So your top 10 performers, I'm gonna widen this out to the last 12 months. Your top 10 performers on fast Bermuda greens within the last calendar year: Chesson Hadley, Zach Johnson, Harry Higgs, Sam Burns, and Matt Fitzpatrick are your top 5, followed by Louis, Brian Gay, Kevin Tway, Denny McCarthy, and Harris English. So if you remember just a second ago, we saw Chesson Hadley in the par 5s. Now he's number 1 in fast Bermuda putting. So that'd be interesting to see how that correlation works, if there's any at all, as we go through tonight's show. Zach Johnson, always a great putter. Fitzpatrick, we got a question on last night, so he is very good on Bermuda green, so this should be a fit for him, at least on the greens. Louis, premier player. Denny McCarthy's always a great putter. Harris English from the south, mainly Bermuda greens down there, so that makes a whole lot of sense for me. And then let's see what else. We looked at a few other metrics here. I know we looked at strokes gained approach, but let's get a little bit more specific in that I know we looked at par fours, 450 to 500, as that was a little bit of the stronger correlation than the 400 to 450. So your top 10, I'm going to bring this back into 6 months. Your top 10 par 4 scores of the length of par 4s here at Waste Management or at TPC Scottsdale, the 450 to 500. Top 10 are Victor Hovland, McNeely, Justin Thomas, Patrick Cantlay, Pat Perez, Billy Horschel, Adam Schenk, Daniel Berger, Luke List, and Mito Pereira. Probably no surprise here. Your premier players, Billy Horschel, first time he's now popped. Let's see, Luke List coming off his win at the Farmers. Mito, still worried about Daniel Berger. He was trying to play last week at Pebble Beach, being the defending champion. Ended up withdrawing, so I just don't know where his back is. I don't know if he knows where his back is, considering how hurt it is. But so yeah, I'm just a little wary on Berger this week. And by little, I mean a lot wary, as in I don't know, unless I hear some specific updates from those in the insider community or whatnot. I'm probably just kind of staying away and accepting that if he plays well, I'll lose, because that's the risks that I'm not willing to take. But there is a look at the par 4 players that are best of the length here at Waste Management. The last thing I want to review from last night are the par 5s, just again because it seems like it's the most important metric here at TPC Scottsdale. So your top 5, your top 10 par 5 scorers in the past 6 months: Patrick Cantlay, Seamus Power, McNeely, Rahm, Gooch, Wise, Scheffler, Fitzpatrick, Tom Hoagie, and Hideki. So again, a lot of your either really hot players right now. Hoagie coming off his win. Seamus Power has been playing some great golf, even though he kind of falls apart in the weekends, especially Sundays. He's still been playing some fantastic golf. And then your premier players, Scotty Scheffler, Cantlay. Hey, Josh, thanks for joining again, man. If you just came in, make sure you rewatch the first, looks like maybe 10 minutes or so, as I redid the Microsoft Excel portion, because I realized how cosmically I fucked up doing all this sorting and stuff last night. So make sure you rewatch that after the show tonight, the first 10 or so minutes, as I attempt to correct the errors that I was doing last night with the sorting of the stats in Excel. But there is a look at the kind of the summary of stats that we looked at from an overhead or broad view perspective. I'm going to come back to these strokes gained, and let's look at the leaderboards here from the Waste Management. You can see I've been digging in a lot today and whatnot, trying to figure out. As you can see, I was on 2017 a little while ago. I'm going to bring it back to 2021, and I've found some interesting stuff that I don't think I didn't expect, at least seeing or looking at the data in that course evaluation tab, where the lower the number, the better and whatnot. So we looked at 2021 extensively last night, but I want to really highlight a couple of things here. So last night we didn't look at greens or good drives really all that much. We saw that greens were, at least numerically, more important on the spreadsheet. And you can see here, it's a fairly strong correlation here. You've got your winner that was tied for the lead in greens. You had some middling finishes, but no miscuts. You had, generally good finishes to middling finishes. Good drives, though, is a lot of the same. Now, you do have one clunker in here, but it's a lot of the same. Top 30s, you got your premier performers, but you still have a lot of ways to go down before you get a miscut. And the reason I like good drives this week is that it combines, one, either hitting the fairway, or two, the player still hits the green in regulation. Because this tournament, while fairways aren't necessarily the most important, if guys are driving it wayward, there is water here, there is native area. So as I was going back in years, it was surprising to me how much good drives kind of popped up on these top of the leaderboard. So again, some pretty strong correlation here at the very top. You've got a clunker from Corey Connors and a miscut, but a third, a ninth, top 20, top 25. Good drives gained seems to be something that I'm looking into. I don't know if I'll finish up with it in the final data model, but you can see here, there's a lot of these upper finishes with a good drives gained. There's a clunker in 2019, but you got a top 5, a top 10, a top 15, winner, top 5, top 10. There's some pretty strong correlation. We didn't even look at that last night. So I wanted to highlight that for you all. These two metrics, good drives and greens, are generally, pretty hand in hand, especially since greens is kind of a subset of good drives. But I don't know. I really like this good drives gained for this week. Something's kind of just pulling me in that direction. That might just be a gut feeling of mine. And if you all want to see greens instead of just the good drives, then by all means we'll look at that. But I've just got this pull towards good drives, and I wish I could explain it better than that, than just a gut feeling pull, however you want to phrase that. Let's see, birdies and bogeys as well, and I'll come back to 2021 here. Birdies and bogeys, gosh dang it, wrong. So there's been a lot of discussion in the past couple of weeks. I mentioned to the farmers, anytime it's difficult, I default to bogeys avoided, where the data said you should focus on birdies, and that was one of the big reasons why I hit on Luke List. Last week it was bogeys avoided. Even though I didn't bet Hoagie, I had him very high in my rankings. He was very good at avoiding bogeys. Now, this week it seems both of them are pretty important, as well as double bogeys avoided, which I've never really paid much attention to. But when I dug into the data really heavily today, one of these two stood out, and it was birdies. You can see just how strong this is. We'll just go in the top maybe 15 or so. Top 5, runner-up, top 10, top 15, winner, top 5, top 15, top 20, top 25, runner-up, top 5. This is strong. This is strong, at least in 2021, and maybe that was an outlier. Like you can see here, even though these guys, some of them were, kind of neutral on the bogey avoidances, some of them had a lot of bogeys, apparently, and it didn't prevent them. Here's Horschel and Sabatini who missed the cut, but some of these guys, Sam Burns, top 25 finish, he apparently had a lot of bogeys. Didn't stop him. JT Poston, same amount of bogeys as Sam Burns, but he finished with a 11th place finish. It was all predicated on the birdies gained. We'll go to 2020. More of the same. These birdies gained. you've got a top 25 and then two, clunkers. To be fair, two clunkers, but going after those three, or mixed in with those three, you got Webb Simpson, who was your winner in 2020. Then top 5, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, top 20, top 20, top 25, and then another run of success as well. So, and the two clunker guys here, or one of them at least, Sebastian Munoz, had a fairly good amount of bogeys. It's surprising to see Hadley was not very, okay, that explains that. So he was, essentially just under field average for bogeys, but apparently he doubled quite a bit. So that's what prevented Hadley from rising higher on the leaderboard. So there's a look at the birdies from 2020. And we'll do one more year, 2019 as well. And it's a lot of the same in the sense that here it looks like the bogeys avoided would be a little bit more important. But again, 1.8, 2.8, whereas at the top here it was 1.8 and 0.8. So the birdies, winner, third, I'll be kind, say top 25, top 10, top 15, middling, top 5, top 5, top 10, top 20. You get the idea. Birdies seemed to be the stronger of the two correlations. Not to say that bogeys avoided isn't important. I might put that in the data model in the end anyway, but I'm certainly putting more weight into the birdies gained. And if I put bogeys avoided at all, it would be 5% in the data model for Wednesday. Whereas this is showing strong enough, I could put 10% in this, maybe even more, depending on how many metrics I want to use. When we went through the course breakdown last night, and I'm going to reset this, and a little foreshadowing, I'm going to come to par 3s here. But when we came to the breakdown last night, we saw that, again, this is for top 10s, par 5s, extremely important, 4s, and then 3s. And it looks like 3s are, not so important here. But again, remember your y-axis here. There's not a lot of difference between these two. And then we came to top 5s, and it got a little bit more disparaging. And then the winners looked like the par 3s really kind of didn't matter. But when I went through the leaderboards, I'm going to reset this to the top 10s. When I went through the leaderboards, there's your par 3 winners or leaders. Here's in 2021. You've got 2 miscuts, but surrounding that, you've got a top 25 is your worst here. And you have to come down to, what's this, maybe 20 to 25 before you get your clunkers. And again, surrounded by 2 miscuts, I get that. But look at these high finishes as well. You got a top 10, your winner, runner-up, top 5, top 5, top 5, top 10. So there was it was all or nothing last year for the par 3s. In 2020, when Webb won, again, doesn't look terribly strong. But if you are able to siphon out these outliers where, someone like Denny McCarthy performed well on all the par 3s, there was something else that was holding him back that year. JT Poston, middling finish, but surrounding that, runner-up, 2 top 25s, 2 top 5s, top 10, a top 10, a top 20. Kevin All, miscut, top 10, top 10. So there is more correlation than I saw initially with these par 3s. And we'll do one more year because one of these years is an outlier. It's this one. This year is an outlier, and I'll show you what I've done to kind of what I did last week when I tried to eliminate outliers and see what metrics were consistent and stuff across all the years. So this year, 2019 was the outlier year, and you still had your cut makers with some high finishes, but you just had your cut makers, middling finishes there. Freddie Jacobson, a clunker, a couple of clunkers here, and this is the outlier when you don't have any missed cuts until you scroll down to here. So I'll give you one more year where it was a normal, quote normal year. 2018, where again some middling finishes here, surrounded by a lot of the top finishers. So par 3 to me stood out today as one of those metrics that can kind of get overlooked, and we saw that, I believe it was at the Farmers. There was it was off the tee, I think. That was a bit of a hidden one that generally you needed to hit the fairway and all that stuff, but distance kind of mattered as well, and that's why off the tee played into the data model that week. So that was some of what I had seen. I've been saying for the past month now that par 4s par 4 scoring is probably just the most important metric in golf. And if you think about it, it makes sense. 70% of the holes are par 4s, but consistently, these lead to the most upper end finishes on leaderboards. And this one was not as strong as some of the other years. You've got a clunker here at 42nd from Kuchar last year, but you'd have to come down to the maybe 18th highest person in par 4s before you get another bad finish, really. Damon miscut. But what I saw during the day today is that these 450 to 500s were extremely important. And this is the outlier year when you have Damon and Day really high on these two at this length, and yet, surrounded by some decent finishes here. This is the outlier year, and it's, somewhat strong. But you come to 2020, par 4s. Again, look at the high number. I mean, just look at the numbers. Not just the fact that they're green. Look at these numbers: 15.5, 11.5, 8.5, 9.5. That is a lot. And you can see, this right here tells it all on why par 4s are generally the most important. And I'll just go in order a few people. Winner, 3rd, 9th, 2nd, 9th, 8th, 9th, 16th, 3rd, 6th. That's pretty strong. That's pretty strong. And it's consistently like this. Maybe not as strong as this, but it's pretty darn consistent. So that's why I'm always going to harp that par 4 scoring is the most important metric in golf. But to come back to the specific between 450, 500, and 400 to 450, because most of the par 4s fall in these two ranges, with the exception of hole 17, which is in this one here. Here's the 450 to 500 from 2020. Again, pretty darn strong. Winner, 3rd, top 15, top 25, 3rd, top 20, 2 more top 10s. It was pretty strong in 2020. 2019, more of the same. Par 4s. You can see here, even Brandon Grace, who was negative on the par 4s in general, was positive at this range. So then 450 to 500. Phil Mickelson, Luke List, pretty bad. But you have some middling to upper tier success, and then down here as well. So 450 to 500 was the range of par 4s that I noticed today. That was the most important. And then I think, let's look at par 5s. It was 550 to 600 that I had seen today. Again, fairly strong here. And that's in 2019, 2020, par 5s. See, this one's the outlier year this year, because Scotty Scheffler led it, and he had some miscuts in here. But this is the outlier year, and again, I'll show you in Excel what I mean by an outlier year and such. And then 2021, oh, that's proximity, you moron. 550, 600, again, really strong. You take out this Grayson Murray, top 20, top 5, 10, winner, 5, 15, 15, 20, 20, all that stuff. So if there's if you guys have a couple of questions, I'll be more than happy to look into it about specific guys or metrics. But at this point, I think, because we'll come back switching between Excel and Fantasy National. I don't want to do it a ton, but I'm going to have to tonight to show you what I was doing all day with the outlier kind of calculations. So let me bring up that now, and this is a lot of well, to use a data technical term, gobbledygook for you all. So what I've got here, these are the 5 years of whatever metric that I'm looking at. Make sure chat's still up. So, off the tee for the 5 years is 2021 to 2017. I just didn't label it. I will for you all now, just so it doesn't get confusing. So this is the average of the 5 years here. And if I need to redo the color so that you all can see it, let me know. But this to me, this is the average, importance. Whereas the lower the number, the better. So, 32 is a lot more important to correlating, high leaderboard success than, say, around the green, which is a 45, which this is still more important than, say, sand saves, which is here at 52. So that's what this is here. And I've just got it color coded. Green means pretty strong, orange is iffy, red is not. But what this is down here, this is what I've been speaking to, this consistency. I've always been trying to find metrics that are consistent. And even if they're not, even numerically or empirically, they say that they're not as important, I'm always going to prefer a statistic that is consistent versus one that is erratic and might average out to be lower. So if you look here, strokes gained off the tee, the consistency is a 2.6. That's probably the lowest number I have seen in a long time as far as consistency from your min and your max. So that's extremely consistent. This is a big, let me insert it here. That's a big check mark for me. Like, I love seeing this consistency at 2. So that is definitely one that I'm going to be focusing on in the data model for sure. And we'll now start looking at some off the tee metrics as we go back to Fantasy National and the spreadsheet of who's performed well here. So off the tee, approach, not as consistent, but you can see just the average amount of finish is 32nd. That's low. So again, I'm going to focus on approach. Around the green is not consistent at all, 18. Putting was a 35, which is again a lower number than it usually is. And this red here means, this one right here means that it was a kind of a negative outlier in the sense that it was an outlier in the good. So if you were to remove that number, the average actually goes up. Well, if I could hit the delete button instead of insert. So you see how that number went higher? So anything in red means the number goes up. Anything in blue means the correlation will come down, which is good. So greens in regulation. This was a positive outlier in the sense that it was on the high end. So you remove that, it starts coming down. So let me hide these rows so it won't get as confusing. So hide rows. So again, the lower the number, the better. And I'm always looking for consistency. So right off the bat, some of the most consistent metrics, we talked about good drives, we talked about greens, approach, off the tee. There's the birdies gained, and this is why I was saying that birdies are going to be more important than bogeys this week, because even without considering the positive outlier, it's already at a consistency of 8.6, whereas the bogeys is 13.72 or 22, excuse me. look what happens here when you factor in these outliers with these rows that I've hidden. Look what happens here with the birdies and the bogeys. So if I take out this outlier here, that metric now becomes a 23.67, so it gets better, more correlating, and it gets much more consistent than the bogeys and more consistent. So that's why I'm going to be putting a lot of weight into the birdies this week. The outlier is positive, meaning you take away last year's performance with the birdies, and it's an average of 23rd with a very, very, very consistent metric. That was surprising to me, but it was eye-opening. So that's why I'm going to be having a lot of influence in birdies. Something else here, I mentioned the par threes. We saw that one year that was an outlier of 43. I mean, it's not a very consistent metric, at least by eyeball. But you come in, you unhide these. You take away this 2019 outlier. That becomes a 31 with a consistency of 2.38. I think that's even better than, it's even better than the off the tee that didn't need the outlier. So this, scroll too far. This right here, par threes. Even though graphically it didn't say that it was going to be, big check mark. Big check mark, because we take away this outlier and look how consistent and important it becomes. So love it. Love that metric. In fact, I gotta undo, so 43.59, because I want to leave that check mark there for you all. That's something I'm definitely going to be looking at. Let's see, none of the par 3 ranges looked really all that important. You see like a 35 here in the 200 to 225. But the reason I'm not putting a lot of weight in that, you look here, look at the consistency, it's just not. You've got, a year where it's 27, 28, and then a 48. So it's just not consistent enough for me to take this, not necessarily not serious, it's just I don't put a lot of value into it since it's not as consistent. Whereas something like, again, the par 3s, where if you remove the one outlier, it's really damn consistent. Just a couple of more here. Make sure you all can see these. You see how the par 4s, notice that this is a positive outlier. The par 4s are at a normal 21.26, one of the lowest metrics there is. You take out that outlier, it becomes even more consistent right here and even more important. So the par 4s are extremely important here at TPC Scottsdale. Extremely important. We're going to put a lot of emphasis on that this week. The par 7 or the 17th hole, the drivable par 4, actually has a little bit of correlation. I don't know how much I'm going to put into it because it's the only par 4 of that range. But you see here, you saw in the course breakdown. I don't want to flip back and forth. Let me see if the view is really, really messed up for you all. No, I think you can see that. Look at that. So sorry for the skew. I don't want to have to keep switching views, but these two right here are the two par 4s. 400 to 450, 450 to 500. So they each have 5 par 4s of that length on the scorecard. Now, obviously, some will play a little longer or shorter as they move tees around and whatnot, but they each had 5, so you don't know, or at least by this, which one is going to be more important. Well, this is what this is for. So here, this was an importance factor, if you want to call that a 37, and this is a 27. So right off the bat, it says 450 to 500s are a lot more important. And look how consistent this is. Even though this is a negative outlier, in which if you remove this, the correlating nut, like the importance factor actually goes up, but it's still very, very consistent and still lower than that. So that is what's leading me to say that 450 to 500 is a lot more important this week than the 400 to 450. So I'm definitely going to be looking at the 450 to 500s like we did just a little bit ago. And then with the 500, or 500s, the par 5s, scroll over here. Again, this is a positive outlier where if you remove this, right now it's at a 36. If you remove it, it is now a 34 with a consistency of 6. So again, I'm getting really, really technical. I'm hoping I'm explaining it as well as I can. By all means, if you have questions, guys, jump in chat. I'm really trying to explain it as best as I can, considering the colorful coding and math nerd that I am. So you see the par 5s, this was a positive outlier, so it gets much more consistent, gets much lower. The 550 to 600 is the same thing, gets more consistent. Oh shoot, that's not what I wanted. Gets more consistent and more important. So that is what I was doing today in the kind of the outlier math that I was doing. Some interesting stuff on the proximities, actually. Again, credit to Richard last week when he said the names of Ryan Armour and Satoshi Kodaira, mentioning proximities. I don't usually put a lot of emphasis on proximities because these numbers generally tend to be in the 60s and 70s. But you can see here a lot of them are in the 50s or even the 40s this week. And I think what I'm valuing, if anything, is this proximity total. You see that the consistency metric actually lowers. I forgot to color code that. That's actually blue as well because I needed to remove that. So if you remove this one, what do you think the winning score will be? Well, the average winning score here is about 18 under. I'll come back. Let me go back to Fantasy National here in a bit, and I'll be able to tell you. But I believe the average winning score is 18. And last week at Pebble Beach, it hit right on the average of 19. And that's why I was pretty comfortable saying that I don't think Pebble Beach was going to be a birdie fest, even though there were a lot of high scores on the first 3 days. The cut was still -5. That's for a 3-day cut. That's pretty average. I don't want to say it's difficult. It wasn't easy, that's for sure. So it wasn't a birdie fest. I don't think this will be a birdie fest either. Now, again, I don't know what the weather, like wind, is going to be yet. Well, we always do that on Wednesday nights. But I'm going to say about 17 or 18, just like last week. Because the average cut here is even par. But to wrap up the outlier shenanigans here, I'm probably going to look at proximity total because it becomes more consistent and pretty darn important, at least by proximity standards. Now, some of these get to very, very consistent, but they're just not as important. Like 51 here, it's a 125 to 150. I believe most of the approach shots, yeah, no problem. That's what we're here for, Josh. Answer as many questions as I can. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I believe, you know what? So we're gonna try to remember this. I think it was 175 to 200. That was the majority of the approach shots here at 150 to 175. Okay, all right. So 150 to 175. I apologize. This is going to be the last time, hopefully, for a little while, that I'm going to switch back and forth from Excel to Fantasy National View. So 150 to 175, you can see here that it had a positive outlier, but it's still not as important as, say, proximity total. 75, well, it's more important it's more important than that, but like 125 to 150 ended up being more important once you take out the outlier. So I don't know if I'm going to put a lot of weight into this one. We put weight into the 200 plus for the farmers because almost double the amount of approach shots came from that range. At Pebble Beach last week, I believe it was 100 to 125, and it was a significant portion there as well. So I don't know how much this is going to be a factor, but it does feel like proximity total is going to be a bit of a factor, especially since you've got a positive outlier here. So I hope I explained that as well enough to where you can understand it. If you didn't, by all means, reach out. Social media, the email in the description. I'll be more than happy to try and explain it a little better or whatnot. Sometimes this might be some of the bonus content that I give my subscribers. I can really dive in and answer questions for them as well in a live feed. So let's come back to Fantasy National. And now that we have taken out some of these outliers and all that stuff, sorry again as I minimize and move stuff around here. Now that we have found the outliers, the whatnot, now we can really start to dig in and find people this week. So, first thing we notice, off the tee. It was such a very consistent metric. Very consistent metric. So, in the last 6 months, the last 36 rounds, your top off the tee performers, Keith Mitchell, Corey Connors, John Rahm, Luke List, and Patrick Cantlay are the top 5. Hovland, McNeely, Sam Burns, Griot, and KH Lee round out the top 10. Not really any surprise here. Corey Connors, you don't really think about Connors as off the tee. You more think about him as approach, but his off the tee game has gotten a lot better, and he has played this event fairly well in the past. So looks like he was at the stadium course at the Amex, missed the cut, but he was at the stadium course round 2 at the Amex. He was at Torrey Pines South at the Farmers. But I mean, other than the Sony Open third round, I mean, he's been gaining off the tee in the measure grounds every time, which is surprising because, again, I think of Corey Connors as an approach-based player, not an off-the-tee player, but numbers don't lie. So he's been getting a lot better off the tee, so that's a name to look out for as we go forward in the week. Luke List coming off his win, Maverick McNeely, Sam Burns, Griot. Interesting. See, I think of Griot in kind of the same way, more of the irons as opposed to off the tee. But, I mean, again, the RSM had a bad round there, but other than that, he's been off the tee pretty darn good lately. All right. Interesting. But you see his strokes gained total just because he still can't putt, he still can't chip. But hey, we said that about Luke List. I bashed him all the time about how he couldn't putt. It takes 1 week. That's the way it goes. Sometimes it just takes 1 week. And I picked the week that it came through, thankfully. So anyway, we saw the strokes gained off the tee. We've looked at approach and putting before. Let's look at birdies. Let's look at birdies gained. Because we saw how important this was and how consistent of a metric it was. So your top performers in the past 6 months, last 36 rounds of birdies gained: Justin Thomas, Patrick Cantlay, Sam Burns, John Rahm, Seamus Power, Hovland, Scheffler, HV3 coming off the win over in Saudi, Luke List, and Webb Simpson. If you didn't follow or don't follow World Golf, the DP World Tour, I believe it's called the Saudi Invitational. Could have that wrong, but they were in Saudi Arabia, and he won the event with a lot of big names there. So don't sleep on HV3. Let's actually bring this in a little bit. Let's go to the last 24 rounds, and let's see if the last 3 months still gives us enough stuff here. Oh yeah, you got 24. You got plenty of rounds here. So let's do the last 3 months. Last 3 months of birdies gained. Now we start to see a little bit different of a view here. Who's playing really well lately? Luke List, Russell Henley, John Rahm, Cantley, Scotty Scheffler are the top 5. Seamus Power, Hoagie, JT, Charles Howell III, first time we've seen him, and Maverick McNeely. Very good. Okay. The only reason I want to look at Eagles is because we saw from the course breakdown, there are a few Eagle chances here. The par 5, all the par 5s yield about a 2 to 3% Eagle rate. It's not the highest, but it's certainly not nothing. And even the 17th, the drivable par 4 yields a fair amount of Eagles. I'm still debating on whether I'm going to put some of that into the data model or not. I'm definitely going to have it off to the side, as I sometimes do, where it's 0% but used as a tiebreaker. I'm at least going to have that. I might have 5% Eagles just because of what we saw in the course breakdown. But in the last 3 months, last 24 rounds, your top Eagle performers, or Eagles gained: Patrick Rogers, Matt Jones, McNeely again, Doug Gim, Cam Davis, Munoz, Taylor Gooch, Sam Ryder, James Hahn, and Wesley Bryan, with Seamus Power lurking outside the top 10, Russell Henley, Simpson. So that's a different set of names, to be honest with you. I mean, McNeely's there, Gooch is there, but you have Rogers is now in the lead for Eagles. Look at that. He's great at Eagles and shit at everything else. Look at that. So hey, there's a narrative if you want to back Patrick Rogers this week. Let's see. Maverick McNeely is great at everything but bogey avoidance. Kind of the same with Cameron Davis. Interesting. Okay. Let's look at proximity. We looked and saw the proximity stuff here. We say 19 rounds, last 3 months. I guess that'll be okay. Let's look at total proximity. Last 3 months, 24 rounds. Best total proximity: Russell Knox, Russell Henley, Ches Reavie, Keegan Bradley, Zach Johnson, Troy Merritt, Tyler Duncan, Jason Duffner, Joel Damon, Tom Hoagie, and Kyle Stanley. Those are your top 11, a few tied for 10th. Probably no surprise. I mean, Merritt, a great Pebble Beach. Hoagie wins the Pebble Beach. Ches Reavie, always pretty good with his wedges. Henley, Knox, iron type guys. Yeah, okay. Fair enough. We saw that the 150 to 175 wasn't the strongest correlation, so I don't even know if I want to even look at that. I think I'm just going to stick to total proximity, unless you guys really want to see it, because I didn't see much of the correlation here. Couple more things here real quick. We'll look at par 3s, absolutely. We saw how important those ended up being. Let's take a bigger view out as we narrow in, or as we get more, what's the word I'm looking for, more broad in the category, say par 3s. Kind of want to broaden the view as well, to get like a baseline, a long-term thing. Whereas, at least in my mind, if you're talking about birdies and bogeys and whatnot, you just kind of want to see who's hot at the moment. At least that's the way I look at it. Maybe you look at it different. If you want to look at it a different way, just let me know. But in the last 6 months, 36 rounds, your top performers on par 3s: Tom Hoagie, HV3, KH Lee, Taylor Gooch, Alex Noren, Patrick Rogers, Rahm, Knox, Burns, and Wise are your top 10. So another interesting list of names here. Tom Hoagie's always been good at par 3s. Actually, I'm going to be curious. What did he do at Pebble Beach on the par 3s? Because he's generally been very good at par 3s. I don't think par 3s were all that important, but I mean, he played them again. Played them very, very well. So, Tom Hoagie doing Tom Hoagie things. Let's see. Par threes. Let's round it out. Look at some fours and fives. Particularly, let's just look at the specific ranges here. I think we did at an overview. I think we did this earlier in the show. Yeah, because we talked about Burger. But we'll go over it again. Top 10 par 4 from 450 to 500 players. Victor Hovland, Maverick McNeely, Justin Thomas, Pat Perez, Patrick Cantlay, Billy Horschel, Adam Schenk, Daniel Berger, Luke List, and Mito Pereira are the 450 to 500 best players at par 4s from that length. We'll look at par 5, 550 to 600, and then we'll move to XL for the last bit here. Your top performers from 550 to 600, Patrick Cantlay, Tom Hoge, Max Homa, Fitzpatrick, Hideki, Seamus Power, HV3, Scheffler, Danny Lee, and Tyler McCumber. Those are your top performers on par 5s, 550 to 600. So that's going to wrap up the Fantasy National portion of the show. Again, we're going to come back to XL one more time, and this time I won't, let's see, losing my mind. Okay, transition to XL. This time I won't cosmically fuck up. That's the goal. So now that we have a specific, very specific set of data elements that we want to look at, let's see who has done those things well here historically at the Waste Management Phoenix Open. And let's start with off the tee, because we saw that it was somewhat important. So your best players off the tee historically here, or at least historically being the last 5 years, here at TBC Scottsdale. You've got Corey Connors, Kisner one time, Molinari one time, Bubba Watson. He's played here 4 for 5 in making the cut, average of a 32nd place finish. Pretty good. Rahm, Keith Mitchell, Scotty Scheffler, Matt Jones, Brooks, and Xander are the top 10 for off the tee. Interesting. Okay. Let's look at birdies. Birdies gained is here somewhere. There it is. Birdies gained here at sorry, let me scroll over for you. TBC Scottsdale. Birdies gained at TBC Scottsdale. Brooks, Brandon Grace, Chesson Hadley, JT, Louis, Homa, Xander, Charlie Hoffman, Gary Woodland, and Matt Kuchar are your top 10. JT Poston and Ricky Fowler, Scotty Scheffler, Matsuyama, Rahm, Hoagie, Simpson. All these guys are lurking, in the 11 to 20 range. So good stuff there. Really good stuff there. So that leads me to think that I'm on the right track here when you see a bunch of these big name finishers. I mean, look at this. Billy Horschel. He's, 25th in birdies gained. I want to highlight him here. He has played this event every year the past 5 years, and he's got an average finish of 34th. I mean, you think 34th, well, that's a middling finish. That's an average. So sometimes, he might have a stellar performance, and sometimes he'll have a clunker. But to have an average of 34, and he's made the cut every time, Billy Horschel's a name to kind of look out for. I'm not saying to go out and wager him like an outright wager, but as we start to move forward and think about DFS, depending on price and ownership and stuff, it's an interesting name. I think he might get a tad bit overlooked, and he loves Bermuda greens. That's for sure. Let's take a look at a couple more things here. Specifically, I want to look, because we looked at par 5s earlier, I want to look at these par 3s. And then the lengths of the particular 4s and 5s. So strokes gained par 3s. Scroll over for you all there. Your best par 3 performers historically here at TBC Scottsdale. Molinari 1 time, Todd 1 time, Brandon Grace, again 2 times, but average of a 6th place finish. Watney, Koepka, there's Harold Varner, Lashley, Hoagie, Kuchar, and Neesmith. Scott Piercy, interesting. He's 3 for 4. Noren, Yeager, okay. Different set of names here. Brooks, He's popped a couple of times, but really not all that many for being the defending champion. Lashley's played here only twice, but average is a top 10 finish. There's HV3. The only reason I'm a little wary about HV3 is that long trek from Saudi to here in a week. The guy's got the game. That's not the issue. I'm a little worried about the travel, but he's clearly shown he can win on the big stage. But there's a look at the par threes. Let's look at 450 to 500 par fours. Par 4, 450 to 5. And I think you all can see that, yeah. So your top performers at the range of par 4s, you got Rahm and Thomas, Poston. We talked about Bubba, Louis, Kisner, Luke List, Norlander, Nate Lashley again, and now Andrew Putnam. Although Andrew Putnam's only 1 for 3 here at TPC Scottsdale. Very interesting. There's Scheffler at 11th. Okay. I said I was going to look at the par 5s. I more want to take a look at the proximity, total proximity, because we've done a lot on the par 5 lengths and such. Let's look at proximity specifically here at TPC Scottsdale. Historically, your top performers on proximity total in the past 5 years at TPC Scottsdale, you got Max Homa. Okay, he's 3 for 3 with an average of a top 25 finish. Very good. There's Hideki, 4 finishes with an average of inside the top 20. John Rahm, Justin Thomas, Brendan Steele. He's 3 for 5, but leads is up there in proximity. There's Bubba again, Lucas Glover, Charlie Hoffman, Peter Malnati. Look at this, Peter Malnati, 0 for 2 with an average of 70th, but yet is one of the top proximity people. This outlier maybe. Does he not do other things well? Who knows? Louis, Stanley, Spieth, Connors. So I'm going to reset this and put it on the average finish for you all, and you can see those metrics for those guys for the sign off of the show. Guys, thanks for tuning in. Hopefully this was clear as mud on the outlier stuff, and hopefully I cleared up the mistakes from last night now that I was sorting it properly and all that stuff. In the comments, let me know, did chat work better? I mentioned it to Darnell. Josh, you showed up a little bit later. I had never changed my chat settings from the time I started the channel, so I tried to set the time period a little lower so that way you could respond with messages sooner. Thanks Josh. I'm glad you all like the show. I know it can get a bit data intensive, but that's what my specialty is, and I try to approach it from a numbers standpoint, give it the best analytical judgment that I can, especially since I don't have a lot of favorite golfers, so I can just look at it from a numbers perspective. But we'll be back Wednesday night for the DFS Tactics show as always. Looking forward to that. I know that the prices are out. I haven't looked at them. I don't usually look at them until tomorrow when I start doing start creating my data model and such. But again, thanks for tuning in, guys. Appreciate it. Glad you all like the show. For any wagers that you have already made for the Waste Management Phoenix Open this week, for any wagers that you're thinking about making, and until I see you Wednesday night for the DFS Tactics show, may all your bets be profitable.